Hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about genetics and family genetics. And there's a few words that you need to know before we get started with our activity. So the first word you need to know is what a trait is. A trait is something that you express or that you have. So for example, it's a physical characteristic. Sometimes it could be not physical. Sometimes it could be a sickness that might get passed on through genes, or it could be kind of a personality. Maybe you're a little more shy or you're more outgoing. Those are also traits that you have. So for example, something simple, a trait that I have is that I have dark hair. My eyes are hazel, so that's another trait I have, and I'm tall. Tall is another trait. And we're going to talk about a few more traits in your family genetics. They have a whole list of traits that you're going to look for in your family. So that's the first word we need to know. We need to know what a trait is. Then we also need to know what dominance is, or what a dominant trait is. So dominant is a trait that can cover another kind of trait. So let's think of an example for that. A hitchhiker's thumb. That's one that you're going to be doing on your family genetics worksheet. So I do not have a hitchhiker's thumb. My thumb goes straight up and down, where a hitchhiker's thumb will actually like bend out at this knuckle. It bends backwards a little bit. So a hitchhiker's thumb, if you have the dominant trait, that means it's going to cover the recessive trait. So the dominant trait is that it's straight up and down, and the recessive trait is that your thumb is a hitchhiker's thumb and it bends backwards. So I have two genes for each trait. One I got from my mom and one I got from my dad. And if I got a dominant trait from one of them, then I will express the non-hitchhiker's thumb, the straight thumb. But that means that I could still have gotten a recessive trait from one of them. So I might have one dominant trait and one recessive trait. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the dominant trait's going to cover that recessive trait. So I'm going to have a straight thumb. So the dominant gene covers up the recessive gene. So now the third word we need to know, and it's one I've already been using a little bit, and that's recessive. Recessive is a gene or a trait that can be covered by the dominant trait. So if you end up with two recessive traits or two recessive genes, then you will express the recessive gene. And so for the thumb example, then you would have a hitchhiker's thumb. You would have to have a recessive from your mom and a recessive from your dad, and you would have a hitchhiker's thumb. But if you got one dominant trait in there, then you're going to express the straight thumb. The dominant trait's going to cover it up. So again, a trait is something that you have, a characteristic you have. Dominant will cover the other type of trait, and recessive is the trait that can get covered, and you can still express that recessive trait as long as you have two recessive traits. So those are some of the very important words that we need to know to be able to do this activity. Now I'm going to show you the paper, how you're going to fill that out, and then we're going to go look at some of my family members. We're going to look for freckles. Actually, let me tell you really quick what the traits are that we're going to look for. So we're going to look for the hitchhiker's thumb, which I already told you about. We're going to look for freckles on the cheek. So freckles are dominant and no freckles are recessive. We're going to look for dimples in the cheeks. I don't have any dimples, so that is recessive for me. I have two recessive genes. If you have dimples, that's a dominant. We're going to look for attached earlobes. These are kind of tricky. So my earlobes are not attached. You can see there's like a lobe part that comes down right here. But if this part goes directly into your cheek right there, or the side of your face right there, then it would be called an attached earlobe. The tongue roll. If you can do that, that's a dominant trait. Some people just can't do that. That's a recessive gene. And the last one you're going to look for is on your foot. If your second toe is longer than your big toe. And that's called the longer second toe. And the long second toe is actually a dominant trait. Okay, we're gonna go looking for freckles in my family. So the first thing you wanna do is either print this off or make a chart of your own, and then you're gonna write the names of the family members right here that you're gonna ask questions about. So you're gonna put yourself there. I'm Miss Amy. And then I'm gonna do my husband and my kids, and I'm just gonna put their initials. So my son Connor, Lincoln, Autumn, and Britton. So, and we're gonna go looking for freckles. So as I go find them, if they have freckles, I'll put an X in the box, and if they don't, I will just leave the box blank. This is my daughter Autumn. Autumn, do you have freckles?
Yeah.
We're gonna zoom in and see your cute freckles. Freckles. Thanks, Autumn. Lincoln. Lincoln, do you have freckles?
No.
No freckles for Lincoln. This is Britton. Britton, do you have freckles?
No.
No freckles. Connor. Connor, do you have freckles?
I do.
My husband. Husband, do you have freckles?
Nope.
So now I'm going to record what everybody said. My husband did not have freckles, but Connor had freckles. Lincoln did not, and Autumn did, but Britton did not. So we can see that having freckles is dominant. So that dominant gene got passed from me to Connor and Autumn, but my husband doesn't have freckles, which means those recessive genes, they've got passed on to Lincoln and Britton, and because they don't have freckles, it means they got 2 copies of a recessive gene, which means I must have a recessive gene to give my kids too. So we have no freckles and freckles. Now you guys can do it for the hitchhiker's thumb and the cheek dimples and earlobes and tongue roll and the second long toe as well. We'll see you later.